Yo, y'all ready for this? Yeah.
What's up, Bodybuilding.com listeners? My name is Danielle Bitts, and welcome back to the BBcom podcast. We are coming to you from Austin, Texas this week, and today I'm joined by Zack Zillner. Zack is the women's basketball sports performance coach at the University of Texas. He's a certified strength and conditioning specialist by the National Strength and Conditioning Association. He has a CPR-AED certification from the American Red Cross and has levels 1 and 2 certifications from the Titleist Performance Institute. Zellner earned his bachelor's degree in sports science with an emphasis in exercise science from the University of Kansas. He currently develops, implements, and supervises the training regimen for the Texas women's basketball team in the areas of speed, strength, agility, conditioning, and flexibility. He also works with the areas of sports medicine and performance nutrition at the university. Zillner has experience at 3 NCAA Division I institutions, most recently serving as assistant strength and conditioning coach at the University of Kansas. At KU, he was the sports performance coach for the women's basketball, softball, women's golf, and women's tennis teams. He worked directly with 2017 Big 12 Women's Basketball Newcomer of the Year, Jessica Washington. He also assisted with men's basketball, including 2017 National Player of the Year, Frank Mason, and was responsible for the development of incoming athletes. Zellner spent more than a year as assistant strength and conditioning coach at the University of Illinois, where he worked with the women's basketball, volleyball, and men's and women's golf teams. During his tenure, the university's men's golf team won the Big Ten championship and the NCAA regional, with 3 players being deemed as All-Americans. Zack, welcome to the BBcom podcast.
Danielle, thanks again for having me. This is great.
Yeah, excited to jump in. And just a quick backstory of how we got connected. So Zack was a colleague of my former collegiate teammate back at KU. So shout out to Corinne Robbins. Thanks for making the connection. It's going to be a really valuable conversation today, and I'm excited to jump in.
Corinne's the best. So I'm glad she could hook this up. This is going to be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So Zack, topic number 1, building Zack before we get into building athletes, right? But before we get into what it takes to build elite level collegiate athletes, let's break down what built Zack Zillner. Walk us through your journey from start to present day. What drove you to the path you find yourself in? And let's start with that upbringing.
Yeah, so I think this is kind of funny. My mom actually got me into strength and conditioning per se. She was crazy, like 5 a.m. every morning. She'd go to her personal trainer, work out. And, you know, growing up, used to watch all the like Conan the Barbarian and Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator videos. And I was like, Mom, like, how do you get muscles like that? And she's like, well, you work out. And I'm like, what's working out? She's like, you know, that thing I do every morning when I go to the gym, like that's how you get muscles. I was like, well, I want to get muscles. And so she's like, well, come with me. And she jokes that I would set my alarm every morning, you know, or I'd have her come in to check on me because I'm like 6 at the time. So I don't know how to set an alarm. And she'd be like, hey, I'm going to work out. Do you want to come? And I'd spring out of bed, go there. And then her personal trainer at the time, like included me on the stuff. So there's like little 1-pound weights, or I'd makeshift a way to like sit on the bike to pedal and all that kind of stuff. And I would do it every morning. So I'd wake up with her, we'd work out, and then we'd go to Starbucks after, and I'd get a little blueberry muffin or something like that. And then she checked with my like pediatrician, like, is it okay for a 6-year-old to work out? And luckily he was like super advanced and knows like it doesn't stunt your growth. So they made a little progression where they got me weight set from like 1 pound to 5 pounds. And he was like, you got to be able to squat it this many times, press it this many times, lunge it this many times. And then from there, the littlest weights were the pink ones and the yellows and the purples, but the big 5-pounders were blue. And so the whole time I was like, you know what, I got to do whatever I can to get to the blues. So like every day after school or whatever, I come down and do my little workout routine. And then, yeah, my mom would check it off and I go down and down and down. And then from there, like most people, you know, you play sports when you're younger, and, you know, lifting, I was like, okay, it's a tangible thing that I can see, like, it'll get me faster, it'll get me stronger, it'll ultimately get me on the field. And then from there, I was, you know, an average athlete. And I think where I excelled was like, I was always the kid who was coming to weights every single day. I would come early to practice, stay after. And it was kind of like that workhorse mentality that I just loved. I found myself liking that even more than like the sport itself, which is kind of funny. And I guess that kind of lends itself to my job today.
Yeah, discipline was instilled, and the discipline of a routine, I should say, was instilled
Yeah.
at a very early age, and that's so rare. I have never heard of anyone working with their pediatrician, especially, 20, 30 plus years ago at
Yeah,
this
I
point.
was
Yeah.
dialed in.
Yeah,
So when
you were
people ask me
in,
training
yeah.
questions, I was like, well, I've been doing this since I was like 6.
Yeah.
Obviously at a small level, but like I've just always loved like pushing yourself, and then every week like you get better at it. Like my mom has stories of me running around the house and she'd time me while she was like making dinner, like yell out the times. And I don't know very many little kids that enjoy doing that kind of stuff. So not sure what it is, but I've always liked doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's always that conversation of were you born or were you made into what you are? And yours is definitely a little bit, you were just kind of born with the grind in
Yeah,
you and
psycho
then
little kid. I'm
molded.
sure the neighbors are like, what the heck is
What is
going
going
on
on
over
over
there? Yeah.
here? Tell us about, this becomes a passion for you, becomes really sounds like your hobby, right? But when did the realization occur in terms of turning this into a career?
So my senior year in high school, I got a job as the receptionist at the company my mom was working at. And I just sat there and answered phones all day. And people obviously see you throughout the day and they're like, oh, what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to train athletes. People are like, athletic trainer or what? I was like, no, I want to be like, whatever it's called that gets athletes to run faster, jump higher, because that really wasn't very popular then. And one of the women that worked in the office, she was like, my brother-in-law is actually the basketball strength coach at North Carolina. She's like, would you like me to give you his email? I was like, absolutely. So I sent him an email, Zach, interested in what you do. Luckily, he responded back to me, and one of his good friends was at the University of Kansas, which was 45 minutes down the street from my house. So I emailed Derek Honnold at the University of Kansas, and I was like, can I come shadow you for a day? And he's like, sure, come on up. And so I prepared for it like it was an interview. So I showed up in a suit, had my resume of my odd jobs and, my grades in high school, toured. And then I was like, I want to intern. And he's like, well, you're going to have to go talk to the boss, who's Andrea Hootie, who, if you guys don't know at home, she's probably the best basketball strength and conditioning coach in the world. Legend. And I knocked on her door and she's like, who's this guy in a suit, like with his resume? And I was like, I want to intern. She's like, well, come back when you're a senior. Like, we only take people who graduate. That way you can prove that you can handle college and this is what you really want to do. And I was like, well, can I volunteer in any capacity? And she was like, sure, you can clean equipment, but you're not part of the curriculum. So if you want to get it here every day and clean, knock yourself out. And so I was like, cool. And so first day of school, showed up at 5 a.m. They let me in, started cleaning all day. And the rule was like I couldn't observe till I was done with all my cleaning tasks. And that weight room at the time was the size of a football weight room. So it was huge. I'm not sure the square footage, but like very large room to be cleaning. So I knew men's basketball trained at 2 p.m. every day. So I was like, okay, it'll give me at least 6 hours to clean. And then I got to go to class and come back. So I'd figure out a way to get there early enough to get all my cleaning obligations and then observe men's basketball from 2 to 3. And then my sophomore year, she had a big staff turnover. They got jobs other places. A lot of people want those strength coaches just because if you're a basketball school at a different school, you want that kind of Kansas pedigree, I guess. So my sophomore year, they like all left and it was just her and I. And she's like, hey man, like, let's see what you learn. Let's hop in and get it going. So I was changing plates and making sure the guys were on task and everything like that. And after a month of doing that, she was like, I think you have a knack for this. Like, I'd like to bring you on as an actual intern. And so from there, I did it all the way through. I graduated, and now it's just something I was truly obsessed over.
Off the bench to a starting player earlier than you expected.
Rise to the occasion.
Yeah. So, would you consider that your first job in the field? Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Like I would, Hootie always gives me crap now because there'd be some times where I'd skip class to make a session. And my whole thing was like, I hate class. I like this. This is what I want to do.
Put me in the weight room.
Exactly. Like, let me do this. And so I was kind of lucky where my first job, I already had 5 years of, weight room experience. And most intern, like you graduate and then you intern for a summer or a semester. And I had 5 years of like reps. So I had like my own teams. I would help out with like the cheer and dance team and cross country and some of these smaller, size teams. And then from there, I got my coaching voice, got to learn from some of the best strength and conditioning coaches in the industry. And so I think with my first job, I already had 5 to 6 years of experience, which was definitely a leg up on a lot of people.
Yeah, leg up for sure. And tell us where we go from KU.
So when I finally graduated, took me 5 years.
With all those classes.
Exactly, right? I had to make them up somehow. I left with one of our assistant basketball coaches to the University of Southern Miss. I did men's and women's basketball and then volleyball. So that was my first job. I was the director of that department, and I was in charge of a GA who was actually older than me. So I was 23 at the time. So we had like a couple players on the team that were older than me. So it was kind of weird dynamic of like, this is your first job. You're not an assistant. You're running the department. And so there's a lot of learning. And that year that I was there was probably the most I have had to grow up my like entire life of like, you're a professional now. You're in these big meetings with these head coaches. Like, it's kind of like, I don't know, every day was a new opportunity to fail and then, get over that. And it was a great growing experience for sure. The resources at Southern Miss were a lot smaller than it was a mid-major school compared to a Power 5. So our weight room was probably the size of 2 of these podcast studios. We had like 2 racks, thing of dumbbells, and that was it. So it's like, how do I get, 50 athletes through this room in a timely manner? So you had to get really creative. But no, it was unbelievable experience.
Different challenges, different skill sets, I'm sure, required for each
the stuff they don't really teach you in school.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do with minimal equipment? You need to get maximal results, and you only have a certain amount of time, and let's keep it rolling.
And then you go to Illinois, you go back to KU, and then you land at UT. Before we get there, this is a lot of moving, and this is kind of part of the nature of the job, which I don't think a lot of people realize. Like, how were those decisions made? Was it easy for you to kind of just pick things up and move along? Did you have to kind of, what thought process goes into that?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I was at an advantage where like I wasn't married, didn't have kids, so like I'm at the mercy of wherever I want to live and whatever I want to do. So when I got the opportunity at Illinois and then back to Kansas, I was like, okay, it's a way to advance. Like, it was sooner than I thought I would. Usually I would picture, you stay at a school for like 2 or 3 years, then 2 or 3 like that. But, I got the opportunity, and it's kind of like you get only so many of these opportunities and you kind of have to go for it.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about UT, the culture, the community, the athletics. You've been there for quite a while now. What do you love most about it?
So this is funny. When I was at Kansas for the second time, it was my alma mater. I'm from there. I'm like, cool, this is my last stop at 25. Like, this is great. I'm going to retire here, be a Jayhawk for life.
I'm locked in.
And then, I got done with my first season. I'm like, here we go. And Andrea Hootie came into my office and she's like, hey, Texas women's basketball wants to interview you. I was like, okay, I'll think about it. She's like, no, you don't understand. Like, it's Texas. She's like, if you get the job, you're going. I was like, well, I don't. She's like, I'm not letting you come back. And I was like, okay. So I got the job, and like being from Kansas, I feel like everyone from Texas, like, you don't understand it. Like, everyone's so prideful in Texas about like, they love Texas, they bleed Texas, everything. And being from Kansas, I just like didn't really understand that. I was like, these guys are cocky, arrogant, like whatever. And then after my first, honestly, week at UT, I was like, okay, I get it now. Like, the pressure and everything that's involved, like, that's the flagship school of the state. Every day you walk through the hallways and there's Olympians, national champions, Hall of Fame coaches. And here you are, trying to make a splash as well. It's just, I love the uber competitive environment.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a personal moment for me. The Texas Longhorns were like my dream team when I was 7 years old watching college softball.
They dominate.
Yeah, that was it, man. I was like, I'm going there. But I mean, it's just really cool to see that come full circle and us sitting here together. It's definitely special. The last point I want to talk about personally for you, Zach, for a long time, building your personal brand outside of college athletics has really, frankly, been frowned upon, right? Until recently. Your loyalty was for the brand of the school itself, but talk about some recent changes and how that's helped you professionally to grow and expand your network.
Yeah, with like the power of social media now, it wasn't something even 10, 15 years ago was a thing. Like, it was hard to find like who was the strength coach for a school, what they did. Like, you might get a bio on a website and then maybe a press clipping here or there, but like, you had no idea who these people were, what they were doing. And as social media started to take off, different coaches were posting, but it was kind of frowned upon. Like, it's like, you should be busy coaching your athletes, not taking videos. And it's
Right.
like, it's not that hard to take a video, and one of your interns can take the video, and they're probably better at it because they're younger and tech savvy. So I was actually venting to my sister about this. I was like, all this stuff on Twitter, there's like bad training and people are putting up these bad videos. And I was just being kind of the guy in the stands complaining. And she's like, well, if you're so good at whatever you do, like, you don't put your stuff out there. I'm like, no, I gave her the same excuse of like, I'm busy, I'm coaching. She's like, sounds like an excuse. And she knows me well enough. If you want me to do anything, just tell me I can't do something or not capable. I'm like, no, I'm going to prove you wrong.
Yeah, sister knows.
Exactly. She's like, well, start posting stuff. And if you're so good, maybe, you can help move the field forward. And I was like, okay, fine. And so I'd post stuff like sporadically, and I got some good feedback and help open up some doors to like speak at conferences or like podcasts or different things like that. And then I always talk about like making an impact, and every coach is like, I want to make the biggest impact possible. But how do you do that if you only have 15 athletes? Like, you're only affecting 15 people every year after 4 years. Like, that's not very many people. And the biggest way you can impact a large number is through social media. Everyone has a phone, computer, something. And so I'm like, here would be a great resource for a young coach. Like, when I was coming up, like, I would have loved to have that resource. Like, the only thing we had was Bodybuilding.com or like T Nation or some forum. And that would be basically it. But now it's like in your pocket, you have access to all these coaches, all these different training methodologies, all that kind of stuff. So I started to post more of my athletes training, me training. And once I got over the hump of what are people going to think, what's going to happen, like, it's been very positive.
Yeah, I mean, similar to me at 7 years old, sitting there watching the Longhorns on a softball diamond, there's no reason to say that someone's now on Instagram, seeing the workouts that you're doing, the way you're developing these college athletes, the way you're breeding winning athletes. There's no reason to say, hey, I want to get to UT and I want to train with Zach, right?
Totally.
So I think it's blown that opportunity up.
I think it's a huge like recruiting tool.
Yes.
Like, we'll meet athletes that come in either like transfers or freshmen, and they're like, I saw your videos. I do some of your ankle stuff that you post or some of your cool down or whatever basic lifts. And like, that's so cool to me that they kind of already know what we're about before, stepping foot on campus.
Yeah. And I would love to see the same happen with the athletic trainers, with the sports nutrition, all of it. You guys are quote unquote behind the scene, but kind of bringing you more to the forefront because you're the reason these athletes are able to do what they do. So I love all of it. Let's transition into topic 2 for today. So we're going to define strength and conditioning because I feel like a lot of people really don't understand, what that means. Yes, it's strength and conditioning, but we're going to talk about CSCS specifically, and then we're going to talk about college versus life after. So we hear the word strength and conditioning consistently within the collegiate setting, but in the last few years, it's definitely leaked into the mainstream market. And that's not due to the fact that it's a concept by any means more so value than the value of certified strength and conditioning specialists is finally being realized by everyday gym goers. So I think it has a lot to do with the emphasis of strength training taking off for the general population, the science that's now being talked about, but it's likely the knowledge that you guys have had all along. It's just being discovered now. I don't think people really even understand the difference between certified personal trainers and doctors of physical therapy and CSCS. So number one, let's just kind of start fresh and say, tell us about what a CSCS professional does, an overview of the job description itself, if you will, just regarding, collegiate, professional, or mainstream settings.
Yeah, I know now to be working the NCAA and I assume all professional organizations, you have to have your CSCS or CSCCA. And basically you need a college degree, and then you have to pass, a test just like the ACT, SAT, the bar exam. It's the bar exam for strength coaches.
Love it. Brand it.
So you pass that. And then from there, I tell people like our job is basically, we go by this quote all the time, like, your best ability is availability. So, when you think of strength and conditioning, everyone thinks of like jump higher, run faster, all these like output metrics. But the thing is that, like, if you aren't robust enough to handle, the demands of play, like in your sport, practice, games, like, it doesn't matter those, metrics if you're on the bench injured all the time with myself. So it's like, how can we make the most robust athletes as possible?
Walk us through the lifestyle of working with athletes coming in at 18 years old, progressing them over time within whichever sport they're there to pursue and excel at.
I think this is the coolest part about the college realm is you get this 18-year-old who's never been away from home. They're going to be out on their own, making their own decisions, away from mom and dad, and seeing this like basically just an older child, have to get used to making new habits, scheduling all that stuff. And then seeing after 4 years, they turn into like a productive member of society, like a functioning adult. And I think it's cool because you see these athletes, the first day they show up and they're either late or don't have the right gear on or don't know what it's like to actually work hard. And then by the time they're done, they're the ones coaching the younger athletes of like the standard and what's expected. So I think if you do a good job with training your athletes, like they should be your other set of coaches that are in the room helping, give the same cues you see, knowing what to look for and investing into, their teammates in the program.
Yeah, expand on that a little bit more, because I think like you said, you touched on this, strength and conditioning, it goes beyond just muscle and speed, right? We are developing these humans to become, for lack of a better word, functioning adults in a way, right? So talk about some, maybe more of the additional characteristics that you're instilling in them once they walk through the doors of a weight room.
So our big thing, obviously, we want them to be better athletes, but in order to do that, you need to have habits and systems in place. So we always talk about when you go to bed at night, the next day should be planned out ahead of you. So you should know what time you're waking up, what class you need to go to, what meals am I going to eat during these times, where am I going to drink water, what's my time between classes, what time do I need to get to weights, what time do I need to allocate to treatment, social time, whatever. So it's not like you wake up with your hair on fire, like, I got to get to this class, but then I have no idea when I'm eating and what time's practice. And so it's like planning and setting up almost like a, routine of like, how is this going to make me the best athlete possible? So a collegiate athlete, their most important time during the day is practice. So they need to be fueled for that, rested for that. And if you show up underfueled, dehydrated, not rested, like the chances of you developing skill in practice to translate to the game is minimal.
Yeah. And I mean, you need them kind of as low stress as possible throughout the rest of the day. When they walk on the field, when they walk into the weight room, you need them dialed in, you need them relaxed, fed, as you said, or fueled, right? And well slept. Absolutely. So all of these things are important, not only from a performance perspective, but just for them to be able to sustain the lifestyle that college athletics requires. So right now you're working with the women's basketball team at UT, but you have a history with volleyball, golf, softball, etc. It's a tall ask to condense this within a few minutes, Zach. But can you begin to give us an understanding of, your why and the how to your approach for each sport and why they're all so uniquely different? So to kind of just break open, yes, we don't train a golf athlete the same as a basketball athlete. And then we're actually going to walk through some of the sports once we nail that down.
So the big thing, how we train athletes like year round, is health versus performance. So there's kind of this misconception about training. Are you training to get someone more healthy or perform better? So high performing athletes aren't necessarily the healthiest athletes. So when you're at your most reactive, fastest, all that kind of stuff, you probably don't feel that good as far as like everything's tight. That lends itself to basketball. Like you need to be super tight and reactive, but you can't be like that all year round or you're going to get injuries. So throughout the year, we kind of cycle through health phases, performance phases, health phases, performance phases. Basketball is a change of direction sport. So I'd argue it's the hardest sport on the body, just because you're changing directions at high speeds for an entire game, entire practice, and you're on a hardwood floor. And so like everyone thinks, football is so hard on your body, but I mean, it's collisions. There's few positions that get hit more than others. But a typical football play is 10 seconds and then you got 30 to 40 second rest. Then you do it again. Basketball is nonstop all the time. And the nature of the sport is we train 48 out of the 52 weeks. So it never really stops. Like they'll have like a break off before the summer, break after, no Christmas break. And it's like, it's a constant revolving door of stuff. So it's like, how do we balance, getting performance metrics, but also keeping these athletes healthy?
waves of intensity.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And it's the same method that we preach just for Gen Pop as well. Everybody listen to this podcast mostly. I don't think we have too many collegiate athletes listening in just yet, but it's the same thing, right? And it's the same thing we preach on here almost every episode. If you're going through an extremely stressful time in your life, well, they have, if you're not a collegiate athlete, you have that luxury to, hey, back off, right? I'm just going to do some mobility, some stretching. I'm going to go to yoga instead of going to that HIIT class, things of that nature. Collegiate athletes, similar to professional athletes, there really is no off season. I mean,
pedal to the metal all the time. Yeah.
Right. So you kind of, they have to work with professionals as yourself to navigate that. How are you dictating which athletes need what within your program? So I think this is a big one. And I'm going to use myself as an example here for a second. This is not a good reflection of a great strength and conditioning coach, but I've had an experience with not so great, and then ones who I would want to train with again right now, right? And one of those is Emily Schilling. She's with the University of Illinois.
Yeah.
She was, without a doubt, she is the one who instilled the love for strength and conditioning and just the love for weightlifting and really more so the behind the scenes efforts of athletics. So shout out to her. But I did at one point have one who would kind of copy and paste the programming for every single person. The bar was loaded up at the same weight. Everybody was expected to lift that. Let's talk about, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It was at the time the football
That's usually what happens.
coach
Yeah.
who was training the softball team. So my question for you is, how are you dictating which athletes need what within your programming, and why is it really a case by case basis? Even though we're all training for the same sport, that each body is going to be different.
Yeah. So they'll come in as freshmen, and everyone does this honestly every couple months. Is we have a sports science department, and they'll go through every couple months and do a battery of tests, movement tests, different strength tests, a DEXA, so your lean body mass test. And then from there, we kind of build out what you need. So like if you're someone that's really high on the strength, like the force end of things, probably don't need to keep hammering that. We probably need to work more speed, velocity based. If you're someone who's really fast, but super weak, we probably need to, work more on that force continuum. If you're just kind of somewhere in the middle, like a lot of these freshmen, like you need a little bit of everything. From there, we force plate test them. So they'll do a counter movement jump on a force plate. And that kind of lets us know their loading strategy. So do they load more through their knees, through their hips? Do they only bend their knee a half an inch and jump through the roof? Does it take them forever to get off the ground? And then from there, we kind of put them into buckets of, do they need more reactivity? Do they need more strength? Do they need more speed? Do they need more mobility? And then from there, we custom tailor the program for what you need during that time of the year. So we'll get all these back. I'll go to coach and be like, hey, what do you expect from this player? How do you want them to play? Is that possible? How many minutes do you expect them to play? Is that possible? And then kind of giving them a realistic idea of, what we can do with each athlete. Like if you're a horrible athlete, there's only so much we can do. And also if you're a high end athlete, we may just need to work on that health time the whole time you're there. And so we take all that into consideration. Everyone has their tailored like N of 1 program. Luckily we have enough metrics where we can compare you to, players that play professionally. So like players that play professionally need this type of strength, this type of speed, this type of mobility in this area, and how close or far away are you from that? And then from there, we kind of build out a dashboard and go from there. So it's just constantly testing, checking to see if we did worked, on to the next thing.
It's the ongoing checks and balances and,
Yeah.
and creating that balance within the player too, because if we're unbalanced, that's where we're setting ourselves up for injury, right?
Yeah.
So it's a really unique approach. And where does rehab with injury, when that does happen, injuries happen.
Totally.
Sometimes
You play sport, you're probably
it's
going
going
to
to happen, right? It's inevitable. You can do all the prehab and all the strength work that you can possibly do. It's still going to happen. Where does rehab with injury come into play? Let's use Rory's ACL, return to play process for a perfect fitting example.
Yeah. So ACL, we'll take her for example. So she'll have surgery. I like to be involved in every aspect. So I like to be with the athletic trainers, PTs, doctor's appointment, all that kind of stuff. So we're on the same page with everything. So we have a big group kind of chat where we can send all test results. What are you seeing? What am I seeing? And then, it's basically in the first part of rehab, it's more PT heavy and less on my end, I guess, because you're pretty much limited in the early stages to upper body and the healthy leg. And then once it gets more towards where they can do more, it's more strength and conditioning, return to play, then PT. And so I'm at every PT appointment, and we kind of go through every day of, what they're doing. Is that painful? Is that not painful? How'd you respond from yesterday? Was it too much, not enough? And then from there, slowly build the building blocks. So you need strength first. And once that gets into the equation, some power, and then speed. And then through that whole time, you're trying to build, work capacity. So you're not fatigued in all those environments. But yeah, we're constantly testing her to see, what stage of rehab she's at, where we can go. And she's been a trooper. Like, if you want to come back from being hurt, no matter how severe the injury is, like, it's an everyday thing. It's not 3 days a week, 2 days a week. Like, it's every day, multiple times a day. If you actually want to get back to, better than you were before the injury.
Yeah. I mean, it's the pit crew, bringing the car in, and we have 3-4 people working on this individual to bring them back. It's a collaborative effort.
And the whole idea is like, have a cohesive unit. So everyone's speaking the same language to the athlete. Cause what you don't want is the PT saying what I'm doing is wrong, or I'm saying the PT is doing something wrong. If we only did it my way, we'd be this far ahead. Like, you can't have that. So it's got to be the same language and kind of what direction we're steering the ship.
Right. And setting that athlete up for the right expectations. If this person's saying, I think you'll be back in 6, this person's 8, this person's 4, just the mental, we just touched on this in our last episode, the one that's coming out very shortly. The mental health of these athletes as well is a huge, huge component that needs to be factored in, especially when they experience any type of injury, but especially one that requires a surgery such as an ACL. It's the mind game is
I think that's the biggest piece.
Yeah.
Like, you're building back confidence, and it's a traumatic injury. So your body, when it gets hurt like that, like, it's going to be guarded because it doesn't want to do that again. And then the biggest thing with rehab is like the mental hurdles that you go through and the coping mechanisms. Like, I tore my Achilles like a year and a half ago, and, I'm washed up. I'm not coming back to play in the NBA or anything like that. But like, my whole identity is being active. And during that 8 weeks where I had to just like sit on the couch, I was like, oh my God, like, questioning everything I've been doing and whatnot. And I'm like, if I feel like that as hopefully a emotionally equipped old guy, what's an 18, 19, 20-year-old doing? Their whole identity is this sport. They want to play at the next level. Like, what are they going through? So what things do we have in place for them as far as behavioral health, coaching to talk to about, take it day by day, be happy with your milestones and keep pushing.
What kind of support is given for them in a more literal way?
Yeah. So Texas, man, the resources there are incredible. So we have everything, obviously the best PTs, doctors, all that kind of stuff you think of with a big institution, but we also have a big piece with behavioral health. So there's, specialists that help with like performance anxiety or, depression. Like, the mental health thing is real. Like, when we were playing, like, there wasn't really social media that was like, Danielle went 0 for 4 and she sucks and she's the worst softball player ever. Mm-hmm. You just like had your bad game. There might be a little press clipping about it, and then that's it. And now it's like, if you have a bad game on a big stage, like, people are constantly in the comments talking, all this kind of stuff. And I don't know about you, but if someone was criticizing me like that at this age, it'd be hard for me not to internalize it. And so it's not what these 20-year-olds sign up for, is like to have, Joe whatever commenting that you suck and you should quit basketball forever.
Well, it's like whenever the Olympics happen, it's like the guy sitting on his couch eating chips, watching like the diving competition.
Oh yeah,
like,
she need to tuck her knees more. Come on, you got to do that. And you're like, dude, you're gonna fall off the couch.
Exactly. But I mean, your point is so extremely valued. Me at 18, 19, I didn't have the tools to cope with that. I mean, that was over 15 years ago at this point, and the emotional security is that not there, the emotional maturity, and they just shouldn't have to do that.
I mean, you feel like you're injured, so you're already on an island.
You're vulnerable.
You can't practice. You're not in the games. You're like on the team, but like you're doing everything by yourself. And so it's like you go from this team camaraderie, rah, 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 to like you're on the sideline doing your PT drills. You're in the ice tub after practice. Like, you're not playing in the games. Like, it's a totally different scenario, especially someone who plays a ton. Mm-hmm. Like, you're used to be the one out there making the big plays, and now you're just clapping on the bench. Like, that's I think a lot of athletes, it's tough not to just go internal and poor me.
Yeah.
But some of the athletes, the way I see them respond, I'm just like, that is so cool. Like, she's taking the initiative. Like, I can't play, but I'm going to coach. So I'm going to help these athletes with what they need to do. And that's what you want right there.
I mean, I love that you said that, because they're a divide definitely comes into play even with that player and their teammates during that time of what they're physically able to do and what she or he may not be able to do. And that's where the bond really comes into place with the strength and conditioning coach, the athletic trainers, et cetera. And they kind of just lean on them a little bit more during that time. But you said it perfectly. They do kind of become a coach in that way. They're now seeing things from a different perspective. They're able to help their teammates in a different way that doesn't involve them physically being in the game. So it's a unique outlook for sure. Let's dive into the specifics of some of these sports that can be applied to even the folks at home. We're going to go through basketball, volleyball, golf, tennis, softball, anything else we want, a wild card that we want to throw in there. And I want to break down what the strength looks like, what the conditioning aspect looks like, and then even the injury prevention looks like. So why don't you kick it off with basketball, your hot spot?
Yeah, basketball, I think the biggest thing is monitoring like training load. So what happens usually is like, there's time periods in the NCAA. So in the off season, you only get 8 hours with your athletes. 2 of them can be on the court. So you go from 2 hours, and then in October, you go from 2 hours on the court to 20 hours, however you want to use it. So you could use 20 on the court if you wanted. And the toughest thing is coaches haven't worked with their athletes for a full practice for like almost half a year. So what do they want to do the first day? Like, let's get after it. 3 hours. Come on. We need to get after it. And it's like that spike in workload is kind of what makes or breaks people. So if you, just like in any good strength conditioning program, you should periodize and start low and eventually add volume over time. And we're getting to the point with sport coaches to realize, hey, I know you really want to get after them today. We can go 2 hours today, hour and a half tomorrow, 3 hours the next day, an hour the next day, kind of this undulating model. And that's what helps athletes stay the safest. But as far as getting somebody ready for those demands, like, there's no better way to get in shape for a sport than playing the sport. And it seems common sense, but a lot of people, like, the athletes aren't playing pickup to the same level that they should to be prepared for practice. And so it's my job to basically get them used to the demands of practice. And we have trackers that track, the workload that they're doing in conditioning and workload in practice. So it's called Catapult. They wear it in the sports bra. It's like between their shoulder blades. And it gives me accelerations, decelerations, how fast they do those accelerations and decelerations, distance covered. We get pretty much every metric. So I can go through our week in the summer and know, like, hey, we need to get 20% of what a practice workload should be. Okay, today we need 50%. Okay, we need to back off and do 10. And so it's periodizing conditioning and getting them ready for the demand. So basketball is a lateral reactive sport. So a lot of the things we do are, creating stiffness, your ability to brake, accelerate, get them to be more efficient movers. Volleyball, you jump a ton. And so, but the running, like, you're going to run 2 or 3 steps. So the conditioning, as far as running type of conditioning, isn't really as heavily leaned on as for basketball. But what we will do is a ton of plyometrics. And so with volleyball, you can kind of tease out by different positions. So like a middle, they basically stand there and go side to side in like a 3-foot box. And then an outside, it's more of like they time up their shots every time. So it's the back pedal, they jump, spike the ball, back pedal, rest. And so like their conditioning is going to be kind of similar to that. A libero's kind of like a basketball player. They got to be lateral and reactive all over the place. So you kind of train those athletes a little bit differently depending on the position demands of their sport. Golf. Funny enough, when we go through our health phase for basketball, we kind of train them a lot like golfers. So golfers rely heavily on rotation. So if you need to rotate efficiently, you can't be super stiff. And basketball players, they get super stiff. So in order to make them healthier, we need them to rotate more. So a golfer with rotation, you're kind of looking at everything from like the foot all the way up to the head of where's that missing link, why they can't internally rotate their hip or finish through their swing and kind of go through there. So it's totally different. The conditioning, we do a lot of like loaded carries and stuff because these guys have to carry their bag for such a long time. We'll do sprinting in small doses just because that'll help with overall speed, club head speed, all that kind of stuff. But a lot of the stuff we'll do, if anyone knows what a Versa climber is, it's kind of a miserable machine. It uses your whole body for cardio, but we'll do things where it's like, okay, you're going to go 100 feet on the Versa climber, take 30 seconds, make a putt. And so it kind of simulates they're carrying their bag up a hill, their heart rate's up, they have to get their heart rate down to sink a putt. And so we can kind of play around with some of the things we do to kind of simulate their sport, which is creates a lot more buy-in for the athlete for sure.
That can probably help with a little bit of anxiety too.
Absolutely.
They're getting up there for that putt. People are looking at them. All eyes are on them. And let's just develop the breath work. Let's develop the response needed to get that heart rate down.
Very
That's
similar to a free throw.
Yeah.
So we'll do kind of that stuff. We'll do a sprint, got to get your heart rate down, make a free throw. And it's tough to magnify what happens in a game because there's 10,000 people yelling at you. You got another person coming at you. And so if you can't calm down in a controlled situation, like what we do in strength and conditioning, like you don't have a prayer out on the court. So we're trying to instill those skills as soon as possible.
That's great. What about, let's do tennis.
Tennis. Tennis is actually super fun because the conditioning demands are crazy. So some of these matches are like 3 or 4 hours and it's a change of direction sport. I might say that might be the hardest sport on your body just because you're on concrete, but it's the best of both worlds. You need to be able to rotate, but also you need to be stiff and reactive. So with tennis players, it's honestly managing the load. So they're like prehab, rehab, recovery stuff is honestly more than the actual training. Just because these bouts and practices, like if you ever been to a tennis practice, like they're no joke. Like they run so many miles and it's stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. So it's all about keeping that body healthy.
Let's round it out for softball, baseball, either or.
Yeah. So softball's kind of cool because every position's a little different. So I'll kind of compare them. Obviously a pitcher is a rotational athlete. Even with softball, like you're not rotating as much as a baseball pitcher, but there's rotation involved. So you train them pretty similar to like a golfer. Running in softball, it's doubles and triples. Like people aren't doing that a whole bunch.
Quick trips.
Yeah. So you can really concentrate on like power development. So softball is one of my favorite sports to train because like you just get after it in the lift. Like all the things you think about of being awesome, lifting in the weight room, like that is softball. And the culture around softball, like you lift, like it is so fun to watch, a group of women get together and like pushing each other, like, let's go. Yeah. So I love that. So pitchers are more rotational. Your middle infielders are kind of like basketball players. They have to be reactive. They're usually your quicker type athletes. And then center fielder would be more like a sprinter. So you're going to have to track down those fly balls, all that kind of stuff. And then everyone needs to be able to rotate, to hit. But it all depends. Like, are you a power hitter? Are you a slap hitter? Are you all this kind of stuff? So everyone always asks me like sports specific. It's more position specific within the sport.
I love that. I can definitely attest writing PRs on the weight room walls.
Oh, it's so fun.
It was the best.
Like softball players are the best.
Rowdy, for sure. So Zach, all of these athletes graduate and your time ends with them. What's your advice for those who may seem a bit lost in terms of how they should work out for life after college? Their activity level is significantly lower. Their goals are going to change. They probably likely aren't going to be eating as much. They shouldn't be eating as much as, right? Their diet's definitely going to change. So walk us through that process. Walk us through the hand that you even play and helping those athletes make that transition as well.
Yeah. So just kind of backpedal a little bit. If I couldn't be a strength and conditioning coach, I wanted to be a teacher. So I love to teach. And so my athletes always make fun of me because when we have the weight session, I explain the why behind everything we're doing. Why is this movement important? Why is this rest period what we want? Why do you need to go heavy in this certain situation? And I think arming them with that knowledge of the why behind everything, it creates a lot more buy-in. So I can either give them the why or they're going to find it off TikTok or their uncle or their old high school coach. And I'd rather it come from me. And then we have a pretty open environment. So if any of these athletes have questions like, why am I back squatting? She's split squatting. We can explain, this is what helps for your body type and your position and XYZ. And so the goal is to educate them through this whole time so they can write up their own programs or know what lifts work best for them. And more importantly, which ones don't. And so they're armed kind of like with this knowledge that they could put together, intelligently designed for the most part, weightlifting programs. From there, we know we've harped on nutritional habits through their whole time. So we kind of correlate it to, if you have a big day that's practice, it's going to be 3 hours long and you have weights, like you're going to need more gas in your gas tank. If we have a recovery day where it's, yoga in the morning and you have the whole day off, like you probably don't need to eat like you're practicing for 3 or 4 hours. And so it's kind of correlating that of like your activity level needs to be correlated with your fuel level. And then food choices, like we're always steering them to like whole food diet. So we go to, it's called the tank, where the athletes eat, and we go there. I'm with them lunch pretty much every day. And we go through, you make your plate of what protein do you want? What carb do you want? What vegetable? Okay. We have practice today. Maybe pick 2 carbs. We're not practicing today. Let's get more veggies and more protein. And so they can kind of build their plate along with their activity level. And then I like to correlate with, you ate a great meal today. How'd you feel after? I've had energy, wasn't tired. And then sometimes I'll let them, pick whatever you want, and they'll make, a bad choice. Like, how'd you feel for like, I need a nap. I'm tired. And you're like, okay, that correlates, right? So like, if you want to feel good, eat good. If you want to feel crappy, eat crappy. And that
advice goes well beyond college.
Yeah. And like, I always joke, like, like you need to educate these athletes on what to eat. And I was like, if I gave everyone $100 to make, a great plate to eat for lunch, I'd say 99% of people know the right choices. It's like your ability to choose what's right for you, or are you going to give in to the cake looks good, the burger looks good, the French fries look good. Like that short term, pleasure dopamine hit. Yeah. Is that worth you feeling like crap or not performing at practice?
Right.
And so like when our athletes are having bad practices, I'll kind of be like, what'd you have before this? And they're like, oh, I didn't have anything. Where it's like, I had Chick-fil-A breakfast and a Coke, and you're like, and you feel like garbage,
wheezing,
right? Exactly.
Sprints right now. Yeah.
So it's like how to correlate with that. And then we like to, like in the summer, we have an optional day every week, and we'll bring in like a yoga person, go do Pilates, go do an Orange Theory class, go swimming, go mountain biking. And they can kind of see like, ooh, I really like yoga. Maybe that's something I want to do next. Or I hate riding the bike. Like that's not something I want to do. So it's kind of giving them experiences of like different ways to train. And then when they leave, I always tell them, especially when they're on breaks from us, like they'll go home for 2 weeks after next week, and I'll give them a workout plan. And then between that, I'm like, and then if you want to do something else, do it. Like if you want to do a yoga class with your mom, do that. If you want to go for a long walk with your grandma, do that. Like, I don't care. Like it's your time to pick the other 48 weeks. Like I'm choosing. So,
well, the lessons you guys are teaching them on campus can then become intuitive decisions that they feel equipped to make once they step off campus. Like you said, even if it's just for 2 weeks, if it's for summer recess or break, and then beyond once they graduate. So it's just fantastic. And it's so impressive how you guys are taking that approach.
Yeah. I just want it to be kind of a system. Like even our athletes that go train pro, like they can be someone to tell their new strength coach, like, here's what I'm used to. Here are the movements that agree with me. Here's the ones that don't. And then kind of take control of their own career. Cause at the end of the day, like their body is their vessel to make money at the next level. And if they're not training it the right way that needs to be done, like it can make or break you.
Yeah. Well, if they're getting this experience now, the next person has their work cut out for them. Their shoes to fill. So Zach, let's move into the final topic for today. And this is going to be specifically around women's basketball. So we're in an electric era for women's basketball, and it's exciting to see, from Caitlin Clark to Angel Reese to your very own up and coming stars like Rory Harmon or Madison Booker. These players are getting the views needed to put the sport on a long overdue spotlight. Tell us your thoughts on the recent explosiveness, the headlines around women's basketball, the excitement in the fandom that we're seeing. Just break it down.
I think it's awesome. Like if you look back 10 years ago, there was maybe one women's game on ESPN per month. It'd be like a UConn versus Tennessee, and that would be the only game you would see. And I always tell people, like, go to one game, and after that, if you'd never want to come to a game, cool. But like go to one game. And so I have a bunch of friends down here, and they'll come for one game to like, support me. And then the next game, like, yo, can I come? Do you have any more tickets? And like now, yeah, like I have a bunch of friends, like, males and females between 25 and 40 that are like huge women's basketball fans. Like that's all my friends talk about now is like the matchups, the NCAA tournament, like what recruits are we getting? Like who needs to play better next year? Who's like all this stuff. And that just like wasn't a thing before. Like my friends joke, like they all watched the women's national championship game and nobody watched the men's one, which in like, what era has that ever been a thing? And I think it's, the more notoriety and exposure, like people see like there's some dang good athletes that play women's basketball at the collegiate level, and it's a fun sport to watch.
What was that pivotal moment? Do you remember there being a specific point in time? Maybe it was a game, maybe it was media coverage, maybe it was broadcast. Over the last decade or so, and working directly with women's basketball, was there a moment that you just said, "Wow, people are really starting to get it"?
I think honestly during COVID, so no one was doing anything, and you're at home and the women's NCAA tournament's on, and you're like, there's nothing else to watch. Like, I guess I'll watch this. And there were so many good matchups, so many good players at that time. And I think it just like took off from there. And some of these athletes like building their brand bigger than basketball. And then like the whole like Paige Beckers, Caitlin Clark, like all these players coming in and being in the media spotlight. And you've never seen players like that before, playing so dynamic and so skilled. And it's just a fun brand of basketball to watch. Like there's always the comparison of like men's versus women's basketball. It's like, it's two totally different sports. Like if the men's game was played on a 12-foot goal and they couldn't dunk, like nobody would watch it. You know what I mean?
Right.
But now you have, these athletes that are arguably, I'd say, more skilled than some of the men's players as far as shooting, dribbling, passing. Like it's a fun brand of basketball.
Talk about NIL. Tell us what NIL means. Tell us the impact we're seeing. I mean, this is new. This is 2-3 years old at this point. So it's in its infancy stages. So tell us what that means. Educate people at home about it, and tell us what this means not only for athletes but for you as well.
So NIL is name, image, and likeness. And so before in the NCAA, if you wanted to be a collegiate athlete, you couldn't accept any money from anybody. From $1, you couldn't get a free meal, nothing. So you got your scholarship, your gear from the school. Thanks for playing. And now with name, image, and likeness, you can get sponsorships. You can be on commercials. You can get brand deals. There's collectives at schools to pay athletes to come in exchange for, a speaking engagement or various other things they've gotten creative with. But right now it's kind of the wild, wild west of things. And that mixed with the transfer portal, it used to be if you wanted to transfer, you had to sit out for a year. And now if you transfer, you can play right away. So it's kind of turning into a situation. It's also not very well regulated, turning into a situation where like every year is free agency. So it used to be you recruited kids to your school from high school. They'd be on your team. Most of them would not transfer. And then you'd recruit, a new batch of freshmen to come in. And now we're not only having to recruit new batches of freshmen, we're having to recruit transfers, and we're having to recruit our kids to stay at our university. And so that usually wasn't a thing. So it's like the money equation, the what is name, image, and likeness technically, and it's just not very well regulated. So different states have different rules, different colleges there's no salary cap. So it's now definitely in its infancy stage of what's going on. But I'd argue that it's no longer like amateur athletics. Like this is professional athletics.
What's your personal opinion on it?
I think better regulated. I think it'll be a good situation. I do think it's great that these athletes can, make money off their name, image, and likeness. Like before, if your jersey was in the gift shop and somebody bought it, you got $0 from it. And you hear, these stories of like Johnny Manziel at Texas A&M. It's like him going there and the amount of buzz he brought to that school with jersey sales, tickets, new facilities, coaches getting paid more, media contracts, and the athlete gets, hey, you get a free education. Like, I don't think that's necessarily fair. So I think once they get like a better grasp of things, I think it's a great thing for the student athlete.
Yeah. All right, Zach, to round it out, I have 2 questions for you. The one is, tell us about your favorite memory as a CSCS coach in the collegiate setting. And number 2, give us some advice for any aspiring college athlete, wanting to play in that setting.
I think my favorite moment, probably during our COVID year, we had a brand new coach. And during that time, if anyone was in college athletics, it was miserable. Like you couldn't bond with your team because you had to be 6 feet away. You had to have masks on. The arenas had nobody in them. The team we had at the time was, no offense to any of those athletes, like we weren't a very good team. And from the first day of practice, I'm like, this is going to be a rough year. Like, we're going to finish middle of our conference, hopefully make it to the NCAA tournament. And that team, through teamwork, grit, all that kind of stuff, made it to the Elite Eight, which was like far beyond anybody's expectations. We were one of the last 8 teams standing. And to kind of see that group, our point guard at the time transferred, and she had 3 ACLs in her college career, never made it to the NCAA tournament. And to see her like win that game to go to the Elite Eight, and it's just, there's nothing better than to see those athletes, the look on their face when they recognize like all the hard work they've done has paid off. And I mean, as a coach, like that's what you want. Like, that's why people cry when they win big games, is because they see like all the early mornings, all the late nights, all the little decisions that they had to make and choose excellence over having fun. And like, to have that all culminate on one night is so special.
Yeah, the thousands of hours that led up to just that one moment is definitely special. And then tell us about your one piece of advice for aspiring college athletes.
I'd say like, get ready to work. And I think so many high school athletes, especially when we get them, like, you're the best player in the state, maybe in the country, and you might not necessarily have been coached hard in high school. Because if you're the best player in the nation, probably the other 10 people on your team needed way more coaching and feedback than you did. And just going to practice is not enough. Like, that's a requirement to be on the team. And if you really want to be excellent, like, you need to come in before practice, after practice, weekends, off days. Like, get used to that when you're in high school. Like, start out small, like 20 minutes after practice, shoot a bunch of free throws. You know, the next day, come in early in the morning, work on your ball handling, like work on dialing in those little habits that are going to separate you from everybody else. Like, there's no secret. The greats are who they are. Like, is there one single Kobe story where it's like, yeah, Kobe showed up right before practice, and then right when it was over, he left, and then he was partying all weekend, he didn't come to the gym? Like, no, it's like all the stories are, he came in early, he stayed late. Like, he had this like intense focus about him. And if you really want to be great, like, that's what you're going to have to sacrifice.
Zach, one more for you. I lied. What's the impact you hope to have on the athletes that you're working with?
My biggest thing is like to instill this like work ethic that these athletes, no matter what career occupation they choose, like if they just outwork, use those same skills that they learned, you know, in the weight room, on the court, they can do whatever they want in the world. And if you're just willing to, when you feel like quitting, to keep going, like that's when most people quit. Like, when you feel like quitting, that's when 99% of people feel like quitting. So if you just go through that point and then break through that barrier, like, there's nothing in this world you can't accomplish.
Love it. Zach, thanks so much for stopping by today. Tell the audience how they can follow along on the rest of your journey.
Yeah, I'd say my biggest way to get a hold of me is Instagram. So it's ZACK_ZILLNER. I'm most active on Instagram. I have a Twitter, but I feel like Twitter is just all negativity these days. So find me on Instagram, and shoot me a DM if you have a question or want to make it to a game.
Thanks for coming in while I pass through Austin, Texas here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode here at Bodybuilding.com. Stay tuned for more stories along the way.
Yeah.